For this episode of Aspire To, we're going to be interviewing barrister Helen Valley.
My name is Helen Valley and I'm a barrister working at 25 Bedford Row in London. I became a barrister over 20 years ago, and I'm very conscious of the fact that the steps I took to become a barrister may be very different to what young people today will need to do. But I'm going to say a little bit about how I started in the role. When I was a student at school, my main interest was history, and history was what I ended up studying at university. And then and now you can convert from studying a first degree to specialising in law, and the way you did it in those days, and I think it's the same now, is that you do a one-year course to convert to the study of law. And once you've studied law for 1 year, you then go on, if you want to become a barrister, to train at bar school. And at that stage, you learn a lot about not just the practical side of the law, but you also learn about the academic side of the law. And once you've completed a year of training at bar school, at that stage, you have to go through the process of pupillage. And that process involves you following another barrister around for about 6 months. And you watch everything that they do, and you ask them a lot of questions, and they help to train you. And then in your second 6 months, you're allowed to go on your cases by yourself. And it's at that stage that you actually get to speak in court alone. So you do a lot of training to get to that stage. So it's quite nerve-wracking when you stand up for the first time in court. But you do that for about 6 months. And if you want to become a barrister practicing independently, after that period of training, you hope to be taken on by a set of chambers. And sometimes you have to work in more than one set of chambers before you get taken on. And sometimes you find that the first set of chambers that you're in, you may not be taken on, so you have to go to another set of chambers and do some further training there. But you have to be quite determined, because it can be quite a long and winding road before you actually find yourself in the right set, and it's a lot to do with timing to be taken on and become a barrister. One of the things that young people should be aware of is that being a barrister means you can practice in lots of different areas. I work in the area of criminal law, but barristers also work in other fields such as family law, employment law, immigration law, commercial law, and sometimes they're involved in matters that involve personal injury and contract. So it's a very wide field, and when you study at the academic stage, you may find that you're interested in lots of different areas, and it's only when you start your pupillage that you realise, well, this is the area I actually think I would like to practice for in my career. Another aspect of this is that a lot of people like to become barristers because they like speaking in public and they like speaking on behalf of other people. And there are other ways you can do that, because if you become a solicitor, you can also be an advocate in court, because there are provisions for solicitors to train and speak on behalf of clients in court. They're called solicitor advocates. And if you were interested in the law generally, but you're not particularly keen on the aspect of speaking in public and speaking in court, you can become a solicitor and work in all the fields that I've spoken about, and you're more involved in the preparation of the case. And so you would speak to the clients, you would help with all the investigations of the case and prepare everything for court. And so if you were interested in law and perhaps in the academic side of law, but you were not particularly interested in speaking in public, you could become a solicitor, and then you would be able to utilise your skills in a different way. Well, in the days that I was dealing with it, we had O-levels and A-levels. And in those days, because there was no option in my school, in fact, to study law. So what I would have said is, if there is an option to study law, either at O-level or A-level, I would certainly take that option, because it's an early opportunity to realise if you're interested in it and if you have any skill in the area. In my day, all we could study were things people were tended to study either sciences or the arts. So we did history, geography, English, rather than a broad range, which I understand students nowadays have a much more of an opportunity to study lots of different subjects. So I would certainly say, if you have the opportunity to study law at an early stage, I would study it. And it gives you an advantage when you get to the stage of studying at a later stage. Some students go on directly to study a law degree, and that certainly would give you an advantage if you've studied it before you go to university. My early life was very much geared around going to school. I had a lot of school friends, and I went to my local comprehensive school. As far as life was concerned, because my father was a teacher, studying and working towards your goals was always something that I was brought up to believe in. And so it was important to work hard at school and to try and do well in exams. But I also had other interests. I always liked dancing. I used to go to dance class a lot and had a lot of friends. So it was important to work, but it was also important to do other things. And the other thing that I did when I was a student was I worked in a shop, I worked as a play leader, and any work experience or life experience is helpful, because you get to meet all sorts of different people when you work in the law, and the more life experience you have, the better. Originally, as I said, I was interested in history, and I think I would have possibly become a teacher. But I became interested in law. There was always a certain background of law in our family, because my late father, studied law himself. And he always used to talk about it, and it always sounded very interesting, particularly criminal law. So I did decide to pursue that as a career after I studied history. And as soon as I started it, it was just as interesting as I thought it would be. And as time went on, I realised that I was particularly interested in criminal law. I did practice for a short period of time in family law, but I found that I was particularly suited, I think, to speaking in public and speaking on behalf of people, and that led me directly into criminal law. The only experience I had that was related to law, and it's one of the things that we always suggest that young people do, is to try and do a mini pupillage or to do work experience by going to a set of chambers and following a barrister around. Because other than the experience I mentioned in other fields, the best way of finding out what sort of law you're interested in is to actually go to a set of chambers and follow a barrister that's actually doing that particular type of work, because then you get to see the reality of what it involves on a day-to-day basis. Well, there was one story I thought that ties in with the question of travel, because sometimes you go to an area that you're not familiar with, and there was one occasion when I went to somewhere which was a very small village, and it didn't have a lot of crimes being committed, it so happened. And on this particular occasion, when I arrived, it took me a while to find where the court was, the magistrate's court, and where the police station was. And when I went to the magistrate's court, they said, well, we've only got one prisoner today appearing in court, and he's in the police station across the road. And I walked across to the police station, I spoke to him, and we prepared to go to the court, and they put him in a police car to drive about a 5-minute drive. And then they put me in another police car, and the lights were flashing as we drove to the court, and it was an unusual experience because, of course, in London that would have been a very normal day-to-day type of case, but it made me realise that in certain parts of the country and in certain communities, the appearance of somebody accused of quite a serious crime was an unusual thing. The other experience that I thought might be of interest was I did a case relatively recently which involved an allegation that somebody had been involved in a violent disorder, a whole group of people involved in a fight at a cinema. And what led to the fight was a straightforward argument between two people in the cinema. And one of them, unfortunately, was fatally stabbed. And his group of friends tried to chase away the person who'd been responsible for the stabbing. And the way the law worked was that they ended up being charged with violent disorder. And in representing one of the persons who was charged with violent disorder, it was very important to look at all the evidence, to look at the CCTV evidence, to look at the photographs that were taken, to look at what every witness said, because it became clear during the course of the case, and what we tried to make clear to the jury who were listening to the case, was that he was not acting aggressively. He was simply trying to defend his friend. And ultimately, we were able to achieve that result, and they were all found not guilty. But sometimes you're given a set of facts, and you have to make sure that you look at all the evidence and try your best to see what exactly happened. And it's your role to try and present what your client says happened. And that was an example, I think, of where reviewing all of the evidence and placing it in front of 12 members of the public to decide, I felt that the right result was achieved in that case. The working week. Usually, as a criminal barrister, you will be in court representing defendants. So you will be going to court, and most of your day will be in front of a judge and a jury. And at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, you'll be preparing that case and other cases that you have coming up. So, for example, at the end of a working day, you might have a conference with a client in a case that's coming up. Or you might have to go to a prison to visit somebody who's in custody to discuss a case that's coming up. So that tends to be the working day. It's actually quite a long working day because you have to do a lot of preparation before you actually go into court, because certainly the stakes are high, and so it's very important that you're fully prepared. I think if you're interested in studying law, it's certainly something that is never boring. However straightforward a case might seem at the beginning, you will find things that will interest you. No 2 days are ever the same, and you will certainly find it's a challenging career. You will find that it's something that is testing you, your knowledge of the law, your knowledge of people, your knowledge of advocacy. And it's certainly something that if you want to do, I would encourage people to do it, and I would encourage them to get as much experience by going to a set of chambers or to a solicitor's office and following somebody around who does the job, either as work experience or as a pupil, and see if it's the job for them.